told me this and roared with laughter. It's very endearing. Judgment with which he concurs. But this split between Paul in person and Paul on paper is part of the repression which makes his book inert and holds back the possibility of a really dynamic SWP politics. The prose is somehow obedient, which is totally wrong for a book which purports to be about revolution. Now, I think I've stressed this, I'm not saying it again, and he's a right laugh. I love Paul. He's a rambunctious scandalmonger and uproarious gossip, a genuine Yorkshire scallywag, a hedonist and a revolutionary. But none of this appears when he writes. He might be Kalinikos or still worse. When Paul's argument ascends to the ultimate truths of Marxism, about how the working class must struggle against alienation to achieve freedom, anyone sensitive to the specifics of literature, and this is Trotsky's great advantage over Stalin, anyone sensitive to the specifics of literature, you've got to yawn and skim read, but not me. I was indexing. I didn't miss a single one of them. You know, they say things like the working class, and they go Marx 1984, which I always find, really horrible. And then, they go Anderson 1979. The list of names. I've got all those names are in the index. The blurb at SUNY sees Marx and ethics rather differently. Now, to get the interesting side, is how is it marketed in the bourgeois zone? I've talked about its relationship to the Revolutionary Party. Now, SUNY say Blackledge has developed an alternative ethical theory for the Marxist tradition. It's as if we need some extra preparation. Otherwise, reading Capital would turn us into a crowd of screaming heathens. Blackledge supplies the doily on which to put the Marxist vase. Now, this doily is Alistair McIntyre and his contention that the Aristotelian concept of the good life underlies Marx's critique of alienation. Now, this is as if anyone trying to keep friends or bring up children or live happily with their neighbours doesn't know what the good life is. As if there isn't a common everyday life we actually live, one that Aristotle or Marx might observe, but which exists quite outside philosophical stances or traditions or academic thought. Our species being, man! The life which James Joyce celebrated in Ulysses and requires no philosophical permission to exist. We don't live in philosophies, we live in real social arrangements cemented by religion. Religions we're continually transgressing. In Ulysses, Bloom, Fries King. Philosophy, on the other hand, is the wonderful outsider, the spur to criticism which Marx turned into a politics. Isolated in a political theory department is one window on the real world supplied by the SWP. Blackledge can't intimate that Marx shattered the distinctions between philosophy and politics, economics and literature, trade unions and bohemia, work and sex. To gauge the depth and violence of Marx's assault on bourgeois separation, bids for supremacy within a single discipline can't be sufficient. So what am I saying? The SWP is at its strongest when its involvement in real struggles weakens the grip of political specialists trained in university departments, and comrades begin to discern the multiple relationship of Marx's 360 degrees critique in every aspect of their life. This is the submerged libertarian streak inside the original IS. I've already referred to this. When Cliff
represented by McIntyre.
Well, he's involved with it. Yeah, I'm sure he is. Yeah. Yes, it's Paul's post-ethical turn version of McIntyre I'm really having a go against.
Okay.
That's completely true. Good heckle. Cliff preferring Luxembourg to Lenin, and Jim Higgins' horror at Cliff's new middle-class cadre from the LSE. Now, I don't stand completely with Jim Higgins' things. Partly it's refusal to relate to revolting students, but on the other hand, I think he had a point. I think Cliff was very dirty about who he formed alliances with. I remember Pete Green saying, Cliff's great, but it's the people he uses or allies with are terrible. It's the tradition the AMM wishes to resuscitate, this Jim Higgins and Peter Sedgwick and so on. We're workerists, but not as you know them, John Rees.
Sorry.
All right, go on, have a clap. Go on, A further problem with McIntyre's return to Aristotle's ethics, as if the problem with Stalinism was not that it inverted Marx's central argument. I mean, he said workers could throw off exploitation by capital, that international revolution abolishes imperial antagonism, but that Stalinism wasn't quite ethical enough. Granted, Blackledge is more subtle than this in the book. He's careful to distinguish himself from the bourgeois humanist critics of Stalin, who ended up as Cold War liberals. He celebrates Marx's assault on moralism, but as the blurb shows, that's not how his book will be received among the non-Marxists of political theory departments. Of course, there are brilliant individual writers among the academics. I'm married to one. Usually because of intense involvements with something other than academia. What I'm talking about is academic system builders, those who turn the humanities into a pseudoscience. This affects the very look of the page. And I've already anticipated this. When you improvise with a text, you find you end up repeating yourself because you... Anyway, I'm talking about Harvard referencing.
You're reiterating.
Right, I'm reiterating. Well, I'm not quite reiterating.
Reiterating.
I'm twittering.
Well done.
Now, interesting, if you Wikipedia Harvard referencing, it's because you're meant to acknowledge the source of every one of your ideas. If you don't, it's plagiarism. This proceeds from the peculiarly American notion that every idea is copyrighted to an individual. William James said, ideas belong to those who have made them, they're branded like cattle, which is absolutely fabulous pioneer American way of thinking about ideas and property. They're branded like cattle, your ideas. But from this point of view, there is no commons. Well, I mean, there was when it was Native Americans, you were wiping them out. There is no material reality to refer to, just tidily wrapped ideas handed along like pass the parcel. Whereas actually the reverse is true. Every idea we can think emerges from a particular social situation and conflict with all its contradictions and tensions intact. Now, in natural science, it makes sense to say the cell wall has a surface charge of negative ions, Joplin, 1933. Because Joplin, in 1933, published a paper in which experiment was made that proved that. They're the building blocks of science, experiments. That's where the referencing really makes sense. You say the name of the date, you can look it up. Whereas if you say things like workers are often unemployed, Soskins, 1979, Marxism is an ethical science, Koernikos, 1984, it doesn't prove anything at all, it just means somebody said something else. So the problem is idealism, basically. The glass bead game of academia erects a glass wall between ideas and everyday life. Those who are disinclined to smash this wall, according to that careerist adage, those in glass houses should not throw stones, these people end up having to fabricate a mirror image of real life on their side of the glass. Now, however detailed and accurate, this image remains static and artificial and inverted, a representation on a screen. It lacks the multiplicity and unpredictability, the interrupted nature of contingent reality. Hence, after the collapse of structuralism, the ridiculous project of establishing an ethics, creating in theory a description of the good life, but it's something people have to get on with anyway without the help of professors. It's called It's Fucking Great to Be Alive. And if there's anyone here that doesn't think it's fucking great to be alive, I wish they would go right now, because this meeting is going to bring them down so much. That was Frank Zappa. And it's what Marx called our species being. Hence the importance of understanding the place of a certain divine called Hermann Samuel Reimarus. And if you look on the wall, there is an impression that we made of the plaque of Hermann Samuel Reimarus on the Lessing statue.
I was going to say.
On the Lessing statue in the Gänsemarkt in Hamburg, that's the goose market, big statue of Lessing, and he appears in a medallion. The reason for that is that he wrote papers, he was a biblical scholar, and there's a lot to read if you're a biblical scholar. Because you can imagine, there's a lot there. And he argued that Jesus was actually a secular revolutionary. He wanted to lead the Jews against the Roman Empire, and the whole Pauline interpretation of his philosophy was completely distorted, and so on. And Lessing dared to publish his papers. The Enlightenment was moving on a bit, and he felt it was time to that you could expose this stuff, and you wouldn't get in trouble as a heretic. But in his lifetime, his great work was called The Art Instincts of Animals. And I must say, when I first heard that title in John Bellamy Foster, I rushed to the book because I thought it was going to be about the art instincts of animals. It's not actually. I think it's very important. John Berger's pointing out that elephants paint and that animals do have art. Magpies collect silvery things and have exhibitions in their nests. This idea of art as some kind of